It's great to see some positivity coming through for the NSE All Share. We gained 0.7% in yesterday's session, and that's after numerous losses coming through. Do you think that this is going to signal a change in sentiments because of all the losses that we've seen for such a while?
Okay, thank you for having me. Like you rightly said, we saw a positive turn yesterday in the market. However, with the result that came out yesterday from Diamond Bank, from Access Bank, we think that the top sellers in the market may still continue to sell. We think the market may not have the recovery that we expect, continuously. So we think there may be a flat trading session today.
Well, Akeem, interesting to note as well that today is D-Day for all banks that haven't released 2009 results. And apart from that, we know that those that haven't complied are going to be faced with a 10,000 Naira fine daily. What is your view on this? Because we've seen quite a few banks coming out with those results and complying, but others have lagged.
Well, I think most of the banks in Nigeria would like to comply. The sanction is not quite heavy. 10,000 Naira per day is not a lot, but I think the impact of them not complying is what matters. So a lot of them are trying to comply with the regulations to ensure they release their results by end of today. And I think most of them will actually meet that deadline. We saw a flurry of results being released yesterday: Diamond Bank, ETI, Access Bank. And we actually believe there are a couple more with the stock exchange that are going to be released today. So we think banks will really want to comply with the guidelines.
Well, Akeem, why do you think we've seen such a big issue with this? Why do you think it's been so difficult for most banks to comply and to do it well ahead of the deadline?
The Nigerian banks have this requirement of submitting their audited financials to the central bank for approval before such financials can be released. So after concluding the audit, maybe in the first month or the second month of the year, they needed to submit those financials to the regulators, and that's usually where the time lag exists, because the regulators take their time to look at the books. Especially what happened last year with the audit that the CBN and NDIC did last year. So the regulators are more concerned now. They want the books to be published, to be real, and as much as possible represent what the states of the banks are. So they take their time. In that wise, the banks really do not have much control over when they release the results. So they will just put pressure on the regulators to ensure that their financials are approved so that they could release it as quickly as possible.
Well, we had Diamond Bank out, as you said, yesterday. Loss before tax of 12.4 billion Naira. NPL ratio, non-performing loans, of course, sitting at 18.2%. What is your view on the likes of Diamond Bank? Because a lot of these banks have now decided to hit the capital markets to try and raise some capital. Do you think this is likely for the likes of Diamond?
We think so. A couple of the banks have actually had their capital depleted. We saw earlier a news item from Skye Bank that they may raise additional capital sometime this year. But we think, however, that people need to realize that last year was more or less an aberration to normal financial years of Nigerian banks. They all had to take very, very heavy hits in terms of making provisions for loan losses. And this year is not starting on a very bright note, as we've seen in most reports. The level of loans being booked by banks in the first few months of this year have actually been very low because they are concerned about the risk exposure. They are not as adventurous as they used to be before. So we think some of them will really need to come back to the market and raise some capital. Whether they will succeed is another kettle of fish. Well,
Access Bank also out with results yesterday, as you alluded to. Loss before tax sitting at 3.48 billion Naira. We also had ETI out yesterday. Your view between those three banks, which would you be accumulating right now?
For me, those three banks, what the financials they release are what we expected. Maybe somewhere a bit worse than we expected. Access Bank, for example, we had expected that they would not make as much loss as they did. But we've seen a recovery in the first quarter of the year. Diamond Bank, same thing. I think that, investors should not panic exceptionally about last year's performance. We should look forward. So I will be a buyer of Access Bank. I will be a buyer of Diamond Bank, looking at the future earnings of those banks as against just, relying or brooding over what has happened in the past year.
Akeem, just very quickly, we're talking about banks that need to go to the capital markets and raise some money. Skye Bank being the most recent, planning to raise 100 billion Naira. Are you concerned about the kind of trend that we've been seeing, or do you think it's going to be overall good for Nigerian banks?
I think right now investors are going to be more discerning. They will actually analyze this companies before they make investment decisions in them. So I think a bank like Skye Bank, because of the potentials they have, should not have a lot of challenges raising the capital. However, 100 billion may appear to be too large. But if you realize some of the, initiatives the bank has been able to embark on recently, they were recently appointed by NIMASA as one of the major banks for lending on the capital edge bill. I mean, they actually have a lot of business that they can do with the capital if they raise it and if they manage it properly. And also, Skye Bank is one of the few banks, that is going to have a seamless change of people at the helm. We're having their CEO retiring end of June, a new guy coming in, the existing deputy CEO, who is well known to the market. So in that wise, there's stability in management, even though there's going to be a change. And we think that's going to increase the confidence level that investors we have in a bank like Skye Bank, and that will also impact on the success of their fundraising ability.